So we've got Keval Patel. He is a sports psychologist, specialises in goalkeeping, and he's got his own podcast as well. So the Goalkeeper Mindset, a Goalkeeper Mindset.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. He's currently playing semi-pro football still. He's been in the academy system when he was younger. Obviously studied to become a qualified sports psychologist. He's doing a lot of work in Premier League academies or like EFL academies. So we've got a wealth of experience here, and I think it's going to be something obviously away from the obvious of what you do on the pitch, but also how you think on the pitch as well, and away from it. So, I mean, I've done a brief intro there, mate. I'm sure it hasn't given you full justice. Do you want to just introduce yourself? Let us know kind of like what you do, and kind of what got you into like sports psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. So hello everyone. It's nice to see you all. So Stephen basically touched on a few of the things there, but I began my career at Chelsea when I was 9 years old. I went there on a 6-month extended trial period after getting picked up at Sunday League level, and they had 2 goalkeepers at the time, but I basically wasn't good enough to make the grade at Chelsea. And I remember the car journey home after I got released. I cried the entire journey home. And the one thing that I remember picking up from that experience when I was 9 was when you're in these high performance elite environments at clubs, you really need to put maximal effort into everything that you do there. And I remember after 2 or 3 months of being at Chelsea, I got really complacent with where I was. So at the time, you had the really big sponsorship deal with Adidas. All the boys were given Adidas boots, they were given Adidas gloves, everything was free. And I got caught up in that idea and mindset of being at a Premier League club essentially, and I got very complacent there. So I ended up getting released because I didn't perform. Ended up signing a 2-year deal at Watford from under 11s to under 12s. This is at a time when Ben Foster had his first spell at the club. And Jonathan Bond, who's now gone out to LA Galaxy, I believe. He was at the club there at the time as well. I spent 2 great years at Watford there, and for a number of reasons which aren't psychologically related, I just didn't make the grade there. The club had moved on at the time, and a lot of boys were going into a school system that they had invented, and I was in education at the time, and I didn't want to move into that school. So that's the reason why I got released from Watford. But the majority of my football journey basically starts at Wycombe Wanderers Football Club, who were at the time, they were in League 2 at the time. The goalkeepers there were Scott Shearer and Jamie Young. And when I got released from Watford, Wycombe basically said to me, look, we've heard some decent reports about you. We're not going to give you a trial. We're just going to sign you straight away. And I'll never forget it. A guy called Gary Castor, who's now, I think, head of recruitment at Aston Villa or Norwich. I can't remember, one of the two. He took me to the first team training ground after all the lads had finished training with the first team. And he basically said, we like the look of you, we're going to sign you. And I was in absolute shock. I didn't expect it on the day. I remember going to the training ground with my dad. And the first team manager walked into the office that we were having this meeting in. And he said, are we going to sign this young lad? And he was like, yeah, we've literally just signed him up. And I was just like speechless. Like, it was the first team manager of Wycombe Wanderers Football Club was standing right next to me, and I just signed a deal to join the academy. And during that time, a lot of stuff happened to me. So when I was in my under 15s year, this is a really, really big part of my identity as a person. My dad got diagnosed with diabetes, which is essentially a blood condition that you have. And it was really hard for me. I was in the peak form of my career at this point. I was playing up an age group with the under 15s when I was 14 at the time. Things were going really well, and my dad got hit with this condition of diabetes. And Nicky Ball was the goalkeeper at the time, but I was on day release at this point, so I was actually missing 2 days of school every week to go and train with Wycombe and the goalkeepers there. And I went into this one session and I had an absolute stinker. And I couldn't explain to the coaches why I was training so bad, but it got so bad that the goalie coach just stopped me from training, and he just made me run laps around the pitch. And I was running these laps around the pitch, and the new first choice at the time, Mickey Ball, he basically said to me, KP, like, why are you running around the pitch, mate? Like, shouldn't you be training with the goalkeepers? And inside, I was putting this mask on. I was hiding all my emotions from him because I didn't want to appear weak. I didn't want to look at him and say, I've been training terribly, and that's the reason why I've been taken out of training. But I couldn't tell him that. Instead, I just didn't say anything to him. I just kept running around the pitch. So that session finished and we all went inside, and I sort of sat on my own in the corner, just kind of sulking and not really speaking to anyone. And the head of the academy and the goalie coach at the time called me up into the first team manager's office. And I was bricking it, like I was so nervous because I knew what was going to happen. I was going to get grilled. So I went into the office and they said, look, mate, like, you've been training really well up until this point. You've been playing really well in the games. Like, what's happened? And you know that feeling, like, if you've ever been told off by a parent, or you've been at school and you've been told off by a teacher, and you just get that apple that sits in your throat because you want all that emotion to come out. I remember just sitting there with this massive apple in my throat, and I was just on the verge of absolutely bursting into tears. And that's exactly what happened. I just sat there for about 2 minutes, bawling my eyes out in front of the first team manager, the head of the academy, and the goalie coach. And I explained to them, my dad's been diagnosed with diabetes and I'm really struggling to cope with it because this man was everything to me. He was taking me to training. He was helping me with my education. He was giving me analysis after games. And all of a sudden, he couldn't take me to training because he was at home. He wasn't well. So the club really helped me in that sense. They got me access to a sports psychologist. Nicky Ball really put his arm around me. And he said, look, don't worry, we're going to look after you. And after releasing that emotion and having spoken to people, I was then able to just focus on football. I didn't have to worry about what people thought of my home situation. And then a month after that, I trained really well, I played really well, and I got promoted to the first team at 15. So at the age of 15, I was training with the first team at Wycombe. I was with the first team goalkeepers every week. I was missing 2 days of school to go and train with the first team. I was going to first team games and doing analysis and stuff with the guys, and it was a really, really good experience. And then I suppose disaster kind of struck and the academy shut down because Steve Hayes, the chairman at the time, left to go to Dubai and took all the money out of the club, and we all had our contracts rejected essentially. So we were all out by ourselves, no club, no contract, and I was in the wilderness essentially. And that's when I got my opportunity at Stevenage. I worked under Darren Saul, who's the current Yeovil manager. Really, really tough manager, but a good, very, very good technical manager to work under, but emotionally really tough. And I signed a 2-year scholar there, and that's where I am today. My first game for the club was against Wigan, who were in the Premier League at the time. I was only 16. These boys were probably a good foot taller than me at the time, and I remember standing in the tunnel looking at these guys. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to survive this match. I was really nervous, really pressurized, and that's when this idea of sports psychology really started to kick in. Why am I feeling nervous? Why am I feeling pressure? I'm about to play in the biggest game of my career. I should be looking forward to it. I'm about to play in front of 1,000 people. Instead, I was worrying about making mistakes. I was worrying about nerves. I was anxious. I didn't want to let my teammates down. And that's where this idea of sports psychology came in. So I wanted to combine goalkeeping with sports psychology so that I can help people like you or you guys, so that when you get to these points in your careers, hopefully with pro clubs or at semi-pro level, that you're able to deal with these things. So I played in the game. We won 2-1. I didn't have my best game because I was so nervous the entire match. But that was the first moment I had experienced with sports psychology. And that's kind of how I've got to where I am now. Sorry for the long-winded story.
It's a good timeline. So, kind of, you got to 16. You've played against a Premier League team. You felt all these emotions that you probably haven't felt to the extent that you felt them there. What was your next step then? So what actually made you take that leap and go from a footballer into a footballer who wanted to delve deeper into the mind, essentially?
It was always an internal passion of mine. It was always a passion. I said at 13, I need to start thinking about plan B. And that is a message that I'd say to all of you, like, without crushing anyone's dreams or being, too realistic, like the likelihood of becoming a top level professional footballer and making a career from the game, you'd have to be maybe, I probably played with about 1,000 players in my career at academy level. And I only know 4 of them now that are professionals in the game. So that just goes to show you how difficult it is. That's not to say that one of you might not be that person, but having a plan B and having a backup, be it in football or out of football, is so important. And it was always my ambition to do something in football if I didn't make it as a pro. And that's when I started diving into psychology. I wanted to understand why I was feeling these ways and how I suppose I can help myself and other people get over those things. So I started studying psychology at school, ended up deciding to do it at university, got a master's in it after finishing my degree, and now I'm here, training to become, fully chartered, get on my qualifications and start helping more and more people as I can.
So obviously you're still playing. So where are you playing at the moment?
I'm at Westfield Football Club, Ryman Div 1, and I train with Bournemouth. Well, I was pre-COVID anyway.
Yeah. So you've kind of married up playing with working as well. So you've had the opportunity to go into a couple of academies, haven't you? And you've had the opportunity to speak to young. I suppose it's young players. It's not young goalkeepers, is it? You've been speaking to squads of players.
Yeah, so I do a lot of work in academy football with the under 18s and I suppose some of the first year pros as well. And I obviously do a lot of one-to-one work with professional goalkeepers in the league at the moment as well. So I do some work with one championship goalkeeper, a few goalkeepers in the National League, and just it's a whole range of things. Just working in football in general with kind of elite and high performance players, basically.
So what would you say the main thing is that kind of comes out of discussions, and what's your key message to young players, especially kind of those who are hoping to break into professional ranks but kind of aren't there yet? Maybe it's they're under 16s or maybe it's the scholars. What do you get from them?
Oof. I mean, we have a range of different things that we speak about with the guys in terms of performance. If I could say one message to everyone that's universal and would apply to every single person in this room, I would say firstly, never assume that you're comfortable. Always strive to work hard and be the best version of yourself. So, for example, if you're going out to training and you haven't had a good day, make sure in that hour and a half that you give your absolute maximum. If you're having a conversation with the coach, treat the coach like you would with your head teacher. Treat them with respect and want to learn off them. If you're doing gym work or conditioning work behind the scenes, give it your all. Treat every repetition, every run, every press up, every sit up as if it's, going to be do or die for your career. And from a mental point of view as well, start to read books, start to listen to podcasts or videos with professionals or psychologists or mindset coaches. Go and invest in all 4 corners of your game, because you're at a stage now where football's about enjoyment, and football should always be about enjoyment, right? But as you get older, the goalposts move and football becomes more about performance than it does about enjoyment. And if you invest the time now while you guys are young to build these corners of your games, by the time you get to 16, 17, 18, you'll have the foundations in place to go and thrive. And 18s football essentially is which players have got those corners filled in the most. So a lot of players have got great technical, tactical, and physical abilities. But the one thing that I've noticed that separates the guys who end up getting pro contracts and the ones that don't is their ability to be present in the training environment, give max effort all the time, and are able to use mental skills to build things like confidence, motivation, manage their stress and anxiety, preparation before games is always spot on. They get good early nights before matches, and their diets are exceptional. And that all comes from mindset. So building those four corners is essential from a young age to then be able to thrive later on in your career.
So talking about, obviously you've talked about all the aspects of your game. So you're technically, you're tactically, psychologically, social. How would you rank them in terms of, if you could put percentages on them, what would you rank each of them as?
I don't think there's a percentage that I could give every single one, because I feel like every goalkeeper's technical, tactical, psychological, and social attributes, they're all going to differ. So for me personally, technically I was brilliant as an academy goalkeeper. I would go into sessions and I would technically look good on the eye, but then psychologically in games, I would go into matches and I would worry about things. So for me, the emphasis of development should have been more on the mental side of the game as opposed to the technical side. Whereas I think of some of the other guys that I work with, like I did some match analysis for Tom Heaton when I was at Wycombe when I was younger. Mentally, he was so sound. Like, he had a routine before matches that he would follow to a T. Technically, he was brilliant, but there'll be things in his game that he may not have been comfortable with, which he may have needed to put more emphasis on. So a good task for all the guys in the room today is to go through your game and say, okay, where are my strengths and weaknesses? What am I really good at? And what do I need to get better at? And what you'll find is that you spend more time developing the things that you're really good at and less time working on your weaknesses, because you don't want to look bad. When actually you need to be applying more hours to your weaknesses and spending less hours on your strengths, because your strengths are going to carry you through anyway, but your weaknesses are the things that clubs are going to really pick on. So if you're going into a club, you need to make sure that your game is in a position where every single one of those corners is ticked off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. So in terms of, I know you mentioned it as well, mental preparation before games, what would your kind of like tips be there? What would you encourage goalkeepers to do before games?
Find what works for you. That's the number one message I give, and you've probably heard it a million times before, but find what works for you. So Tom Heaton, for example, I always use Tom because he's such a good example. But Tom Heaton at Wycombe, he used to play Nintendo DS before a game. He used to have a eye training game on his DS, which he used to look at because he would believe that trained his eyes to pick up the ball quicker. I used to meditate before games because I used to get really anxious, and that used to calm my heart rate down. There's other footballers who believe in putting certain socks on before they go out and play, because for them that calms them down. Every footballer will have their own process before a match. Some will go to bed late, some will go to bed early, some will believe they have to eat certain foods before they play, because in their mind that's ticking boxes off. In episode, I think it's episode 5 of the podcast that I do, Marcus Bettinelli talks about how he has to listen to a specific song before he goes out and plays a match. And him playing that song calms him down because it's another box that's been ticked before he goes out and plays a game. So you guys will all have your own routines, and you guys will all have your own strategies to mentally prepare for matches. But for example, what Tommy will do will benefit him, but it might not benefit Adrian, and Jack will do something that doesn't benefit Harry. So all of you guys will have your own methods and your own way of doing things, and it's about what works for you. So if you feel like something works for you, then stick with it. If you feel like it doesn't benefit you, then try something else. But you're at a really good age now where you can experiment with loads of different stuff, and you can play around with things so that when you get to 16, 17, 18, everything's in place.
So would you, I mean, for me personally, I was very, very big when I played on visualization. I found seeing myself doing things in a positive manner, making a certain type of save, coming to claim across. I found that really helped me. Is that something that you would encourage kind of like everybody to do, or is it a case of, as you say, find what works for you, or is there a set number of techniques that might be applicable?
No, but visualization is a great technique. In fact, I'd say probably over probably 60%, 70% of athletes probably practice visualization without knowing they're actually doing it. What I would say with visualization is that it works for some players and it doesn't work for others. So I've had footballers before in the past where it hasn't worked for them, and I've had players that it's worked absolute wonders for them. The thing is with visualization is that what you guys probably don't realize is that when you visualize things, your brain can't tell the difference between if you're visualizing it and if you're actually doing it. So if you visualized making a save, or if you visualize doing a goal kick, your brain will activate areas and make changes that are exactly the same as if you are actually physically doing those things. And this is why we say to players to go out on loan and get games, because when you go out on loan and you play games, you're building pictures, football pictures of scenarios that are happening, so that once you see those pictures over and over again, you can do them quicker and with better efficiency when you do it in a game when there's pressure. So visualization is a great tool. Another one is self-talk, another great psychological skill. So that idea of talking to yourself and filling your brain with loads of positivity. I will make that save. I will play well today. I will prepare correctly. All of these statements can really help you boost your confidence as well. And if you watch on TV, like tonight, for example, Newcastle are playing, watch on TV, watch the guys. When they make a mistake, see if they say something to themselves afterwards. If they do something really good, what actions and what body language do they show? Like watch Dubravka will be playing today. What body language does he have on the pitch? When he's communicating with people, is it really quiet or is it really loud? Is he got his chest out or is he slouched over? All of these things can give you 2 or 3% on the pitch, which might get you a contract at a club. You never know. But just starting to recognize these things and adding them to your game can really take you really far.
So you mentioned it as well. It's something I did want to touch on, and I want to link it to a certain player as well. Mistake management. What kind of advice would you give the goalkeepers in terms of if you make a mistake in a game, how do you kind of process that, get over it, and make sure that it doesn't impact the rest of your game?
Mistakes are a really hard one, and I've been like you guys. I've made some absolutely horrendous errors in my career. I still make them now in training and in games. It's not a problem. In terms of managing them, everyone's going to be different, and I'm going to highlight this again because every one of you will deal with mistakes in a different way. There'll be some of you in this room that don't care. There'll be some of you in this room that you'll care a lot, and that's absolutely fine. What I will say is that the best goalkeepers, particularly the Premier League goalkeepers and the Championship goalkeepers, in fact, any Football League goalkeeper, the way that they deal with mistakes is they accept them. That's the biggest tip that I can give you guys with mistakes. Accept that it's happened. Embrace it. Live it. Yep, I made a mistake. That's me. That was my fault. I made that mistake. But you know what? It doesn't matter what you guys think of me. It doesn't matter what the manager thinks of me. It doesn't matter what the crowd thinks of me. The only opinion that matters is the one that I have of myself. And there's a great podcast which Ben Foster talks about, and he says, I've stopped caring about football. I've stopped caring about mistakes. All I care about is what I think of myself. Because for him, mistakes and worrying about mistakes comes from fear of judgment. The reason you worry about mistakes is because you worry about being judged by other people. You're worried about that manager that's going to say, I'm going to drop you. You're worried about that teammate that's going to shout at you. You're worried about that mum or dad saying something after the game like, oh, what happened there? But the piece of advice that I would give you is accept that it has happened, because you cannot go back in time and you cannot change that mistake. It's uncontrollable. What you can control is the next 70, 60, 50 minutes of your game and how you make up for that error. So accept that it's happened and then look to the future to say, well, how can I now benefit the team? If I don't do my job for the next 50 minutes, I'm going to let them down even more. Whereas if I try and be an 8 out of 10 for the next 50 minutes, we might nick a result, or they might go and score and make up for my error. And that's the way that you have to approach the game, because if you let the negativity eat you up, you'll find yourself getting really anxious and nervous and emotional during games and before games as well.
And that those last couple of words kind of link us on to this player that I did want to question you about, the angry and the emotional. And I've seen a huge change in this goalkeeper personally, watching games on TV. Jordan Pickford. So more recently, he's started using a sports psychologist, which obviously it's helping him. And we're seeing it especially up here when Everton were playing Newcastle, he was highly emotional. Obviously, you've got that Sunderland-Newcastle rivalry there. And you could tell it affected his game, and you could tell in other games as well if he's made an error or if he's conceded a goal. Sometimes he's got angry, and you've seen it's affected the rest of his game. What have you noticed any kind of change in him of watching him play, and what do you think's affected that?
Absolutely. I actually, use the Jordan Pickford example all the time to describe what we call red brain and green brain. Now, what red brain is essentially it's your emotional brain. It's that idea of playing football angry. You let decisions get to you, you let mistakes get to you. The green brain is that high performance brain, the one where you're in control of everything. You're in control of your body, you're in control of your emotions. And Jordan Pickford and Joe Hart were actually very similar at that point in their career. I think back to Joe Hart playing against Iceland in the tunnel when he's shouting and screaming. Jordan Pickford was very much like that with his players as well. They were playing the emotion of the game as opposed to playing the actual game itself. So for you guys, young goalkeepers in the room, being in control of your emotions has a really big benefit because it allows you to focus your mind and your attention just on what you need to do in the game. Whereas if you focus on the emotion of mistakes or dealing with certain players, that energy and that focus that you need on the task then gets redirected onto something smaller, like having an argument with a player, for example. So being able to control your emotions and being calm during matches, particularly as a goalkeeper, because of the nature of the position, that is one of the biggest skills that you can have. There's going to be times in your career where you're going to get tested. There's going to be times where you're angry during matches. There's going to be times where you're emotional after mistakes. But as long as you try and find that nice level emotional state that you can get into, that happy place, with the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I promise you're going to get 3, 4, 5% more out of yourself during matches.
Brilliant. And I want to go on to your dissertation subject as well. So I found this really interesting, and I think this is something that will help the goalkeepers listening as well. So you spoke about the difference between how professionals process the game and how amateurs process the game. So what did you find there? What were your main takeaways from the research that you've done?
Yeah, so just to simplify a very complicated project into a couple of words, I suppose it is very complicated. So I'm going to do my best to simplify this. Professional goalkeepers, right? They train on average, I would say, 6 to 8 hours a week, and then they play a game. Okay. So when they're training, they are seeing so many different pictures. They're seeing 50 cutbacks a week. They're seeing 100 goal kicks. They're seeing 20 to 30 scenarios of playing out from the back. And every time they're seeing one of these situations, it's getting stored in their memory, right? In their long-term memory. Okay, so you guys will have memories from your childhood, which you can remember. This is exactly what professional footballers are doing when they're training. They're storing pictures in their brain, okay? Whereas amateur goalkeepers like us, we don't play that much football. So we're not being exposed to the same number of pictures as these guys. So when we come to a match, okay, say for example, we're all faced with a cutback situation. Okay, the ball's down the bar line and it's been cut back. A professional goalkeeper will take less time to recognize when the shot is going to be hit compared to us because they've seen that situation so many times before because it's been stored over and over and over again in their brain, whereas we haven't been able to do that. So if you're a young goalkeeper and you want to, improve your reaction time and improve your anticipation, playing games and being exposed to small-sided games and matches is the best way to develop your game as a goalkeeper, because you're exposing yourself to these situations, and that will give you that extra half a second, that extra 1 second to make a really difficult save. And that's basically as simply as I can put it. So we're looking at virtual reality technology at the moment that can help goalkeepers train these things. And we're also looking at how coaches can help these goalkeepers train these skills in training so they can replicate it in matches.
Yeah, I've seen that actually, some of the VR technology, and I've spoke to the guys about it. It's something that's really, really interesting. Was it stuff that you've looked at where you hooked up to the sensors as well, or was it purely just sitting down and seeing situations?
It's purely just off video. In fact, the guys that developed the VR stuff probably started making it at the time that I was researching the topic, because I believe in having the research to back up the actual software, right? And it just wasn't available. So I had, I think it was 6 pros, 6 semi-pros, and 6 amateurs literally watching video clips for an hour. And this is what we found. But I suppose the idea with companies moving forward is that they'll have a VR system out where you guys could do what you're doing now, sit at home with a goalie coach, he can take you through some clips, and you can be learning without even being on the pitch. And the idea of learning, and I think you guys should look this up, and it's called purposeful practice. A really good term for you guys is purposeful practice. That's how amateurs become elite. So if you want to become a pro in anything, you have to learn while you're doing. And that's why, for example, like professional footballers, they're always learning while they're training. And that's the reason why they gather all this knowledge, so that when they get to the pro game, they know exactly what they need to do.
Yeah, brilliant, that mate. So, I mean, I think there's a lot to go off there. I know you mentioned when we spoke, I think it was back end of last week, about a presentation that you had done with QPR.
Yeah.
Is that something that you could potentially share, or could you, if you obviously can't share the slides for any particular reason, is there anything that you think would be of value to the goalkeepers here?
I'm trying to think there's so much that came out that I've actually got it here. I don't mind sharing it, actually. It's not a problem. If you want to make me a host, I'll share it with them. It's not a problem. I'm just trying to think of the key messages, because there was a lot that came out of that presentation, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you make me a host, I'll share my screen and I can show the guys part of the presentation.
There you go.
Perfect. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So I suppose, where do I begin? I suppose the big thing for me would be this, right? This is the big thing for me. We're all brainwashed, right, by football clubs, and I don't mean to speak badly of clubs, they do some great work, but we're brainwashed by football clubs that every single one of us is going to be the guy that goes on to make hundreds of thousands of pounds in playing in the football league, right? But realistically, that's not going to happen for all of us, and that's something that I had to come to terms with quite early on in my career. And going to university and knowing what opportunities you guys have got out there after football is really, really important. I played football at university and I had opportunities to play in front of 5,000-6,000 people in a stadium twice a year. I had the opportunity to network with really cool people. I met some really good football people at university. And these are all things that you guys can look forward to later on in your careers. So yes, focus your energy on football now. Enjoy your football. Make sure you enjoy it. That's the most important thing I would say, is make sure you enjoy it and learn loads. But also know that life is not football and football is not life. There's so much more to life than just football. And having a plan B is a good place to start, because for some of you, like the idea of playing professionally is not going to work out, and that's okay. And you can start planning what you want to do in the future just by having a conversation with mum and dad, having a conversation with your teachers, having a conversation with your mate, and start finding other things that you're interested in. But going to university was probably the best thing that I ever did in my life, because I met some really cool people and I got to play a good level of football. I suppose as well, after football, I did a master's in sports psychology, as I mentioned. But I also still get to train and work with professional goalkeepers. So once a year, I go out to Portugal with a group of Football League goalkeepers to do some football training and psychology work with them. And we play golf out there. We have a laugh. We we have dinners together and stuff. I've done some filming for Sky Sports, so I got to work with Mark Schwarzer at the Watford's training ground for a BT sport program that they did before a Chelsea match. I get to work with professional footballers still, so I still get that changing room environment that I miss. And I also do loads of work in some other sports as well. Like I work in golf. I've got my own podcast. I'm doing some work with Olympic athletes that are going to Tokyo for the Olympics this year. So football's great, guys. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's a beautiful sport, and myself included, but for many of you guys, it's going to be your entire life. But just know that there are other things out there that you can be doing, and other things that you can be passionate about as well. And you should still do other things as well as football. That's really, really important. And I suppose the thing that I shared with the guys at QPR, which I'll share with you guys today, is that this idea of identity. When I used to tell people what I am, I always used to say I'm a footballer, but that wasn't really true, because I was a brother, I was a son, I was a cousin, I was all these other things, and I'm not just a footballer. I wished I'd invested more time into my game. Being honest, I didn't do enough. I didn't do the hard hours away from the training ground like other guys were doing. I didn't go to the gym that often. I didn't do the training ladders. I didn't listen to my coaches. And that's another reason why I didn't make it. You can't control everything in your career, like mistakes, for example. You can't control your mistakes. You can't control injuries, but you can control how you respond to these events. So that's another message I gave them. It seems scary to leave the football bubble, but there's a lot of opportunities out there, so bear that in mind. And in terms of life lessons, I would definitely say plan for the future, because you never know what's going to happen. You need to find a balance between your training and enjoying yourselves, because that's really important that you're able to go and enjoy yourselves. Build relationships with teammates and coaches and people that you work with, because you never know when you can need them later in life. And what I will say is, you guys are young, but make the most of your time that you've got now playing football, because when you get to my age at 24 and you look back on your career, you'll realize how special some of the moments that you have actually are, and you'll miss them and you'll regret you didn't enjoy them more. So make sure you enjoy these moments, when you get out on the grass with Steve, or when you're doing goalie sessions and you're flying around in the mud, or you're waking up at 7 o'clock in the morning to go and train. Just remember why you're doing it. You're doing it because you enjoy it and not because it's a job. And that would be my biggest lesson, is make sure you enjoy the time that you have now, because you never know when it's going to end. And that's basically what I said to them, mate. That's literally exactly what I delivered to them.
No, I think in the space of 5 minutes there, again, I mean, we've been going for nearly 45 minutes, but in 5 minutes there's a lot of lessons there for the goalkeepers to take. And I think it is really important what you've said as well. And I like to push that as well. You can't. It's just kind of like not sticking all your eggs in one basket. You've got to have something else behind you. You've got to stick in at school. You've got to want to, like you said, be more than just a footballer. You've got to be a person. What are you going to do to kind of push yourself and challenge yourself and better yourself? So that's some fantastic messages there, mate. Really, really good there, and a lot to take. What I'll do is, if anybody has any questions, please feel free just to unmute yourself and ask away. Let's see. I know Jack's normally got a question. You got one for us, Jack? Go on. Good lad.
Thank you. My mum's made loads of messages. Loads of notes. I'm gonna look over it later.
No, I'm glad, mate.
Good lad.
Enjoyed. That's the idea of this, is that hopefully if one of you learns something from it, then I suppose I've done my job. That's the main thing, mate. Well done.
It's been my favourite call so far.
That's a huge statement, that, Jack. That's brilliant. Good lad.
Have you got Asmir Begovic's number? I'm gonna text him after this.
Right. I got Freddie Woodman's.
Oh, you've got Freddie Woodman's number?
Yeah.
Oh, Jack, I think you'll be sorting out the host for next week then. I'll be on the phone to your dad. I'll be on the phone to your dad after this. I'm just trying to think. Obviously in the short period of time that we've spoke there, we've covered a hell of a lot. I think there's a lot to take away. Generally, I would say, have you got any advice, or is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you would like to pass on to the goalkeepers?
It's a great question. It's one that I get asked a lot as well, and I never have an answer prepared for it. The only advice that I haven't mentioned already that I should pass on, I would probably go over the idea of enjoying it. I loved football from I'd say 9 to 15. I absolutely loved it. I lived it. I breathed it. Everything I did was football. And the reason why I was like that is because I enjoyed it so much. I used to get so tired in training sometimes. I just used to love making saves. That putting that effort in and having that energy to get up and go for the next set was never a problem. Whereas now, football for me, it's a source of pressure. Like playing on a Saturday, we have to win. We have to win. Even when I was at Stevenage, we had to win. Otherwise, we were in on Sunday running or shoveling snow. And it wasn't fun. Football becomes less fun as you get older because it's results driven. And if you can learn to enjoy pressure and learn to enjoy the sport and remember to enjoy football, the world's your oyster. But as long as you're enjoying what you're doing, and I can't stress this enough for guys of your age, you have to enjoy it. Not that you have to enjoy it, so that's the wrong words, but try to enjoy it and remember what it feels like, that feeling when you make that top corner save, that feeling when you strike one in the top corner against your mate during training, that feeling when you nutmeg an outfield player in training, when you play in front of other players or when you play in front of big crowds. Remember those feelings, because that's the reason why you do this. You do this because you want to play in front of people and you want to be the best version of yourself that you can be.
There we go. We've got one from Steve. I think he's sitting in the car, but he's asked, from a coaching point of view, how do you see the psychological corner being delivered during sessions?
It is and it isn't delivered, in my opinion. From what I've seen, I think the FA do a lot of good work in terms of recently incorporating psychology into the coaching delivery in the way they do UEFA B and UEFA A. But if I was going to give advice to any coach on delivering psychology into their session, I would say be creative and really think about, because most coaches have played the game, right? Think about the psychological difficulties they had playing. So one for me, for example, was decision making on crosses. Why did I struggle with crosses? Because I was nervous about dropping it. So how can I coach a young goalkeeper now to not worry about dropping the ball with crosses? It would be to create a scenario which is match-like with loads of bodies around them and to just put balls in the box and allow them to fail. Now, from a coach's point of view, what that would look like is sitting down and when you're planning a session, identify what the problem is. What do goalkeepers struggle with in a certain part of the game? psychologically speaking. Okay, I've identified what they struggle with. Now, how can I make that into a drill? How can I make that skill into a drill? Whether it's building confidence through trial and error, whether it's decision making through creating a training drill, you can incorporate psychology in any way, even leadership. Like goalkeepers need to be great leaders, right? So how can you encourage a goalkeeper to be a great leader? You could ask them to deliver a session or put on a session for their peers, or you could teach them how to change the tone in their voice for a match when they're communicating with people. So from a coach's point of view, you can get really creative with it. And I would say it's very much a trial and error thing, and it's about thinking outside the box. Every coach will have their set of drills, but if you want to incorporate psychology into that, have your drills and then think outside the box of that.
So would you say incorporating psychology into sessions would be more around, more specifically, processing, like processing a scenario, assessing a scenario, making a decision, and then completing an action? Or do you think we can incorporate elements of mistake management in there as well?
Absolutely. I don't just think psychology is a technical thing. I think it's also a conversation that could be had between player and coach, or other players in the team, or goalkeepers between goalkeepers. It's like if you're trying to build an environment which breeds confidence or which breeds safety, you could have, like, when a keeper makes a mistake, you could have a policy where one keeper sort of go and pat them on the back or tell them not to worry about it. Or you can encourage mistakes, because every mistake you make in a game or training, that's an opportunity to learn. And by creating these environments, I spoke about it with Charlie Horlock, who's an ex-pro at Wickham. You know, we talk about coaching environments. We want environments to have psychology in them, because those are the best environments where you get the best out of players. As long as players and goalkeepers feel comfortable in the training environment, you're always going to get at least 80, 90% out of them.
I suppose it goes back to your example about, was it your time at Wickham after your dad's diagnosis, and you weren't particularly having a good session, and it wasn't a case of, right, what's going on, what's happening, like, and having that opportunity to talk and maybe change things around a little bit and turn a potential negative into a positive during the session in terms of performance. But it was a case of, you weren't having a great training session, off you go, there's a punishment, as in you have to go and do laps. So it's a case of getting hold of the situation, getting to the bottom of it as quickly as you can, and making sure that the rest of that training sessions are positive for the goalkeepers or those who are involved.
Yeah, listen, that situation at Wickham when I was running laps, that wasn't a punishment for what it was. It was a punishment from the coach, because he thought I wasn't training properly. He didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, obviously. But yeah, but listen, we say punishment's a bad thing, and that young goalkeepers shouldn't be punished. I don't think they ever should be punished. I think there should be consequences for lack of effort, or, you know, manners, for example. Like, for me, manners and being polite to people is like paramount. Like, you have to do it, because you guys aren't just developing as goalkeepers, you're developing as human beings. And when you go into the big wide world of football, or the big wide world of whatever you're going to do, having basic manners and being polite to people is a given. And as long as you treat people with respect, like you would a coach, you're always going to go far in life. So that's the first thing that I would say on that, in terms of punishment. The second thing I would say, in terms of a well-being point of view, yeah, you need to have access to people that will look after you. Mum and dad are always a great place to start talking. If you can't talk to mum and dad, talk to a friend. Like, everyone will have their own person that they go and speak to. I obviously, sometimes the guys will bounce stuff off me that I work with, like the pros that I work with, they'll say, oh, Katie, I don't feel good today. Like, I've been struggling today. Like, today hasn't been a good day. And I'll sometimes say to them, like, yeah, I've been struggling today as well. Like, what are you struggling with? Maybe we can help each other. So having good conversations with your mates can also help. And I suppose from again, going back to that psychology and the training sessions, you can have situations which replicate a game. So my goalie coach at Wickham used to come and stand behind my goal during matches, and he would shout as I was taking a goal kick, because when I play in a stadium now at non-league level, you get old grandpas and, you know, old codgers that come out and shout behind your goal, and they give you abuse and they shout nasty things at you. But because I've been trained not to worry about that stuff and block it out, when I go into games, it doesn't even affect me anymore. So again, at your age, you're young, enjoy football, but then start to build the gap and bridge these things together and incorporate these things into your training.
I think you've come out with another little gem there, to be honest. And it's something that, and I know you speak with him as well, Rob Blackburn.
Yeah.
Key message there for me is be vulnerable, be open. As you said, if you go to somebody or if somebody comes to you, you get to work out each other's problems. Because it can become a burden sometimes it's probably more of a male-dominated thing where, and you mentioned it earlier as well, you don't want to be perceived as being weak because you have an issue. I think it's very, very important to be open, to be vulnerable, to speak to people, because they might not just potentially be helping you, but you might also be able to help them with a problem, if not then, later down the line. And I think that it's something that probably needs to be worked into males at a much earlier age, and I think it can probably contribute to a lot of mental health issues later down the line where you feel as if you can't speak up because you're meant to be a man, you're meant to be strong, you're not meant to have problems. And let's be honest, that's rubbish really, isn't it? Because everybody suffers, everybody's burdened by something. And that there's massive. Probably one of the most important things, especially the younger ones, that you can take from that. Don't be afraid to speak out. Don't be afraid to tell people how you're really feeling. Somebody asks you how you're feeling and you're not great, don't just say I'm okay, because it's an easy get out and everybody uses it. And it, you know, sometimes if you go, you know what, like Keval said, I'm not feeling great, then get into a deeper conversation. See if you can work out your problems. Don't leave it all in your head. So yeah, that's
absolutely. You go back to that conversation at Wickham. Like, if I had just said to someone before the session, I don't feel good today, I could have had that conversation before I went out and trained, and I wouldn't have had to run laps. Like, it's really that simple. It's not simple in the sense that it takes a lot of courage to talk about your feelings, and I understand that. But the process of solving things can be made simple, but you have to take that first step to help yourself, and that is really tough. Like, being able to talk to your mates or your parents about stuff is not easy. But there's a lot of conversations that you guys are going to have growing up which you don't want to have with your parents or with significant people in your lives. But at some stage, you're going to have to muster up some courage and have those difficult conversations. And once you have one or two of those conversations, the rest of them will become easier. And all of a sudden, you'll be doing it as if it was nothing, basically.
Yeah, definitely. That's I think that's huge, to be fair. It is above everything else. I know we've spoken about being a goalkeeper, but it's getting that balance, as you say, between being a goalkeeper, a footballer, and being a person. You can put on that front for 90 minutes. When you're playing a game, you can kind of put all your worries and your troubles to one side. Come off the pitch, obviously you've got to deal with them again, and you've got to be able to open up. So yeah, that's huge. It's massive. Just thinking, does anybody else have any questions? Because I know we're just about on an hour now. If we don't, unless there's anything else you want to add, or
I think to be fair, we've covered so much in the hour.
Yeah.
Like, I've gone through pretty much everything, mate. So
no,
yeah,
it's been fantastic. Been absolutely fantastic, and obviously really appreciate your time there, mate. It's been outstanding, as Jack said as well. It's right up there, the conversations that we've had. I mean, you can speak about people's experiences. you can speak all day long about technique and tactics and what have you, but I don't think this is spoken about enough. And obviously what you're doing with the podcast, what Rob's doing with his podcast, the work that you're doing across social media, it's, you know, it needs to be done more. And I think it's brilliant. I think this has been absolutely fantastic, mate. And obviously on behalf of myself and everybody else, thank you. It's been outstanding. It has. So thanks for that.
No, absolutely. Like I said, everyone's got a story, right? And we always hear about how things happen, but we never understand what we need to do to fix them, or what we need to do to do it ourselves, basically. So that's all I'm trying to do, is give people that how and what. So yeah, thank you very much for having me, guys. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys listening to me ramble on for the last hour.
Been our pleasure, mate. It's been brilliant.